on CityCast Nashville, we sure do love to brag about our live music scene. But have you ever stopped to think about what it's like to really navigate our music venues as a person with a disability? Dr. Cynthia George, aka Dr. Sin, joins us to share their perspective on the many obstacles people face just trying to enjoy a night out. We talk about which venues are doing it right, what still needs to change, how to be a better ally, and what it would take to make sure everyone can truly enjoy Music City. It's Tuesday, March 3rd. I'm your host, Marie Cecile Anderson, and this is what Nashville's talking about. When did you first realize that nightlife in Nashville wasn't built with you in mind?
Well, as a young person, I felt like it was built with me in mind. And that's because I did not have any disabilities, right, that were limiting my physical mobility. And so I grew up going to venues and enjoying shows. I loved standing room only shows. I love rock music, and I love being really tight and crowded spaces, right? Like I love the mosh pit. I love those things. And then I had a car crash in 2009, and subsequent from that, I had multiple surgeries and some illnesses set in, and I was no longer able to enjoy the venues in the same way. And so I realized that those venues were not necessarily built for people with mobility limitations. I began to struggle getting into the venues. I couldn't find parking spaces, right? Like a lot of venues don't have ADA parking spaces available. And then I started struggling. I started using a rolling walker, right? And so I would struggle to get that walker to the venue. And sometimes it's the lack of sidewalks and curb cuts. Sometimes it's debris like gravel or broken glass in the road. And then there's a threshold and a doorway that I have to get over. And is that doorway wide enough? Is that threshold blocked? And then when I get in, can I get to the bar to order a drink? Can I get my walker through the crowd to the stage? And so it was like every single aspect of going out presented a whole new realm of challenges that I had to overcome.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so frustrating.
But I also started meeting other people with disabilities at those venues because we would all be kind of crammed over into one corner of the venue, often in the back. And sometimes we had chairs to sit on and sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we would just be perched on a window ledge because that was the closest thing to a chair we could find. And so I started meeting these people and forming friendships with them and realizing that I wasn't the only one struggling with these needs. And so being a singer, right, also sing in a band, I had a different level of connection to the owners of these venues. And so I was able to go to them and approach them about making some improvements to the ADA seating areas. And I've been able to accomplish a lot of change. And it just kind of took off with such momentum. And then I met the night mayor and started a Disabled to the Front group, which I think is how you all found out about me, right?
Exactly. We saw an amazing article about you in the Nashville scene, and I want to say it was about a year ago. So you've been working on Disabled to the Front for a while.
Correct. And we had an official launch party at Eastside Bowl in January of 2025. But I had met the night mayor about 4 or 5 months prior to that, towards the end of 2024. He was making comments at a public meeting, and he had said, if anyone has any special interest groups, let me know, because we're trying to promote nightlife for everyone in the city. And so, of course, I wheeled right over to him and said, hey, is anybody working on disabled people's access to nightlife? Because I have problems everywhere that I go. And he said, why don't we do that? And so from that initial conversation, I was able to turn something I was just doing with my friends to working with the night mayor, where we can work with the city on a larger scale. And I have formed an advisory group. And so I've got a cross representation of different types of disabilities. And we meet together each month and have a business meeting, and we share our concerns about different venues that we go to. We talk about city policy and ways that that can be improved. We talk about the infrastructure and the buses and the sidewalks and that sort of stuff. And we communicate through the mayor's office. There is a mayor's advisory committee also that is working on these issues. And so we partner with these groups to make sure that disabled access to nightlife is on the radar. Because quite frankly, people with disabilities are fighting for their right to survive right now. They're fighting for housing. They're fighting for health care. They're fighting for their care workers that come in and help them take care of their bodies. They're struggling to pay for food. And so nightlife or fun often slips off the radar because of all of those other priorities. And while I'm not going to step back from fighting for disabled housing or health care or any of those things, I'm also here to say that that social interaction and that connection to community is just as important as food and water. And well, it may be a close second to food and water, right? But it is just as important for people with disabilities to be able to engage in the city and in those social activities.
Well, I loved learning that you grew up on Elliston Place, the rock block. And so you've had this love of live music because you've seen some of the best music in the world growing up here. And so I want to give a better idea to our listeners of what it really looks like for you to go out into the world. So like, what does a normal night out look like? Where do you see the most obstacles?
Well, I am a punk, right? And so I hang out at the dive bars and the rock bars, and the rock block is historically Elliston Place, which kind of stretches from the end all the way up over to Springwater, which is on the other side of Centennial Park, right? And so, and I was born at the Old Baptist Hospital, and so I do claim that as my home, right? The rock block is my home. And so I care very much about those venues, but they're not super accessible, right? Like I go to the Springwater and the back lot is all gravel and the front lot is paved. And so I have to make sure that I get there early enough so that I can get one of the spots on the paved lot. And now, of course, if I call them and say, save me a spot in the paved lot, if I know it's a busy show, they will go out. I've got friends that will go out there and stand in the spot to save me a show. But I know that not everyone with disabilities has that, right? Because I also perform at Springwater. Like I have friends there. And so in many ways, I'm using my cool points to improve the status of accessibility for everyone. And these people that own these venues, it's not like they don't like people with disabilities. They love them. They want them there, and they love it when we come in. It's just a matter of them not necessarily knowing what people with disabilities need. And so when I go out, it's a whole lot of that. It's a whole lot of me communicating. You know, I might need some help to get this walker down these steps, or I can't roll this walker on that gravel. But parking is really one of the hardest issues. And that's something that everyone in Nashville is dealing with. Like our parking ecosystem is a bit chaotic. And I think, you know, I would not be the first person to complain about that. But ADA parkers have a unique situation. And we also have laws to protect us that aren't necessarily being followed. And like venues won't even have an ADA space. And a lot of that has happened where these for-profit parking companies have come in and taken over the lots. For example, the Cobra. It's one of my favorite venues to go to over in East Nashville, and there's a lot next door to it. There used to be a handicap parking spot there when the Cobra managed the lot. But now there's a company, I won't say their name, but they have come in and taken over. They removed that ADA spot and they put up signs charging people to park there. And so now they're charging me a fee to park in a spot that doesn't even offer an ADA space. And so those are the things that I'm working with the city and with codes enforcement to improve that in a way where I'm not just automatically like, everywhere I go, I encounter someone that I have the right to sue, Okay. Like that's
Wow.
just the reality of it. Like, and that's how poorly accommodations are managed. Now, are these all major lawsuits where I am harmed? No. But I'm emotionally harmed because it's the stress of having to deal with that and having to have the anxiety of, am I going to get dressed, which it takes. I've got a lot of chronic pain and fatigue, and I use a lot of assistive devices to even take a shower and get dressed. And then when I leave the house, if there's no spot, I have to turn around and come back home, right? And then if I get to the venue, can I order a drink? Where do I seat myself, right? In my walker or my chair so that I can see the show and still be close to an exit to get out if there's an emergency, or to the bathroom if I need to go to the bathroom. I also have urgency issues, right? And so sometimes when I've got to go, you better get out of my way or I will roll over your foot. And so all of these things, like this is part of why people with disabilities just stay home, right? Because
Right.
it becomes so complex. But I'm too young for that. I'm going to be
Right.
going out. Like I would not be upset if they held my funeral at Springwater, right? Like, I mean, that's how, like, I plan on going out until the day I die, because that music is what brings me joy and that's what makes me a Nashvilleian. And I'm not going to give that up, right? It's about quality of life. And my quality of life is being able to participate in and enjoy live music.
Hi, I'm David Plotz. I'm the CEO of CityCast, a podcast network that includes this show you're listening to, and also 12 other CityCasts in 12 other cities. And each one knows their city as well as your local team knows yours. So isn't it time we connected them? Don't you want to know how they're tackling their bike lane problems and housing challenges and sidewalk dog poop crises? That's why I'm hosting a new podcast called Your City Could Be Better. Because it could be. Every week, I'll chat with a different host in our CityCast network about what their cities are doing right and wrong, the weird things they're trying, and the surprising successes, so that we can all learn how to make our cities a little bit better. Listen to Your City Could Be Better on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
What's been your experience when you are engaging with these venues and challenging them to improve? Are they receptive?
Well, some of them don't even respond to my emails. And those are generally the ones that I don't go back to. I will name some that do a great job. And I'll just say, if I were giving out an Access Award today, I would give it to Mike Grimes. He manages the Basement East, the OG Basement over off 8th Avenue, and then also Slow Bar, and also Grimey's, the record shop. But all of those places, he has done a lot over the years to improve the accessibility of the location. He also makes sure that his staff responds to emails like within 24 hours. If I email them to request, I'm going to need I can't do standing room only. I'm going to need a table and a chair for this event. He always makes sure I have a good view. And I've seen him do that for other people with disabilities too. And so it's not just me, not just because he knows my friends are on stage, but they really do that for everyone. And I will also have to shout out Dark Matter, which is an independent venue over on Dickerson Pike. It is an all ages venue and it's owned by women. They pride themselves on being inclusive of all types of people. And I'll tell you, like, they were one that actually did not have an ADA parking space. And I had to turn around and go home. So I called the owner and said, "Hey, I am on my way home because I couldn't park anywhere over there." And she, of course, was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." When the new parking company came in and put up those parking signs, we did not realize that they took away the ADA spot. And she said, "I'm going to fix that immediately." And so now if you go to Dark Matter, you will see that they have their own ADA spot right in front of the venue. And so that's the sort of relationship that we're really looking for are those venues that are going to respond and carry the solutions beyond just me, right? Like, yes, I want to have a good time, but I want to make sure that other people with disabilities that are coming are going to have a good time too, even though they may not feel as confident contacting the manager or the owner about their issues.
You're also a musician. You're in a band called Dr. Sin and the Graduates Rise. How do disabled artists and performers experience nightlife differently than disabled patrons do?
Well, that is a whole other set of struggles. And for me, myself, again, I am a PhD level social worker, and I'm very good at coming up with coping mechanisms and a plan for success. And I've got three of the best men in Nashville as my bandmates, right? I've got Nashville's favorite bass player, Bingham Barnes. My drummer is Jeremy Frey from Apollo Up and Tower Defense. And my guitar player is Jerry Campbell from Spider Virus. And they carry my things. They lift my walker onto stage. They hold my hand when I'm trying to go up the stairs, because a lot of stages are not accessible. And so I could not just wheel my chair up there. Some venues like the Hutton Hotel and the Analog, their stage does not look accessible, but they have a portable ramp in the back that they can bring out and you can get everything or a wheelchair on stage, right? And so those portable ramps, it's important for venues to have. And so if you have a stage that only has stairs, you may want to look into spending $100 or so on a portable ramp if you ever have a performer in a wheelchair. A lot of people with disabilities that are performers are, quite frankly, hiding their disabilities. Or sometimes they might ask for accommodations in the background, or they might say, well, I get sensory overload, and so I must have a green room where I can, be alone and debrief in, things like that. And I will say that I'm working with a group called RAMPed, which is Recording Artists and Music Professionals with Disabilities. They are out of New York, and they are working really hard to organize recording artists and music industry professionals, and making sure that, in the same way that I'm working on making sure the venues are accessible to fans and the audience, they are working on making sure that the industry is accessible to the artists and the workers. And we're working on things like writers, right? Like event writers. And so that, we, like someone that's a performer could tell that venue, I'm not going to perform unless you make sure there's an ADA seating area. So they could even use their power as performers to get that venue to create improved services for their fans. For me as an artist, even though I have disabilities, I will totally acknowledge that it can be a challenge to make sure that I'm doing everything to accommodate my fans that are coming to my shows and buying my merch, and I care about them. And so there's a responsibility at the artist level too, to make sure that your merch table is accessible, right? To make sure that your show flyers are accessible. If you want disabled fans, they do all of the things that fans are supposed to do. And so I would encourage the venues and the artists to make sure that they're taking care of not only themselves, but their fans with disabilities.
What are the spaces in Nashville's nightlife that do feel accessible and celebratory? What makes them stand out? You talked about Mike Grimes and the work he's done in his spaces. Are there others?
I can also add Brooklyn Bowl to that list. And I'll tell you, every single place I'm going to list, there was a problem with it first, right? There's not a single place in Nashville that I have walked in and had no problems at. And so recently the city passed a call for an ADA audit. And that was really for Title II establishments or public entities that the city controls. But we really also need a Title III audit in Nashville, which is Title III under the Americans with Disabilities Act covers all the public entities, right? Restaurants, bars, movie theaters, all of those sorts of privately owned establishments that are public places of gathering. And they have to come up with a plan to accommodate people with disabilities, and a lot of them don't have it, right? And so the small venues will struggle because they don't always have staff that are trained in ADA needs and issues, or they may not have money to make the accommodations that they need, or most of the time they don't own their location. And so it's a lease. And so they are having to deal with a landlord that may be preventing them from making accommodations to their bathrooms and things like that. When you get to the larger venues, they will often have the money to fix their space. In fact, their space is often great, but they may not communicate to the security staff. Like, and I won't name the arena, but for example, there was a big arena. I went to this arena with my walker. I planned 2 months in advance. I chose my seats with the venue's ADA coordinator. I told them I was going to have a walker. And then when I got there, there was a security guard that came to me and tried to take my walker. He literally put one hand on my body and one hand on my walker and tried to physically separate us, which does technically classify as assault. And so he was trying to take my walker because he was saying that no walkers were allowed on the floor. And I, of course, already had this approved, but no one had told him. And I had another friend that was at that same venue. She is blind and she cannot carry a cup. And so she had, again, planned 2 months in advance. They had approved her to bring in a bottle with a lid, and a security guard took her bottle with the lid. She's blind. She couldn't even see where he ran with it. He just took it and walked away. And she was left not being able to enjoy a beverage, you know. And so those big venues, they can spend a lot of money making their environment right, paying ADA coordinators to work with people with disabilities to plan accommodations, and then it all gets flushed down the toilet because they don't communicate it to some security guard that is getting paid minimum wage, right? That's kind of the difference of how a small venue struggles with accessibility versus a big venue. And both of those are problems that can be overcome with communication.
So in past interviews, I've heard you use the term disability joy. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Yes. Part of that is not feeling shame over having a broken body, right? And like so many people, like just last night, I was pulling through a security guard shack, right? And I was asking, where is the ADA parking? Because I need to be close to the venue where I'm going. And this was not a music venue. This was another sort of venue. And the security guard did not answer my question. He immediately went to, "Oh, you have disabilities?" He was like, "I'm so sorry about that." And he's like, "I'll pray that they go away and that you won't need that walker." And I was just like, wait a minute. I have accepted the fact that, you know, my body is injured and I need this walker, and I don't need you to pray for me. I need you to tell me where the ADA parking is, right? And so disability joy is accepting my life and the way it has played out. And part of that includes genetic conditions that led to some of my disabilities, as well as accidents and injuries and wear and tear. And all of those things make me me. And I'm not going to feel sorry for myself, and I'm not going to let anybody else feel sorry for me. I'm going to feel absolute joy in the things that I have overcome. And there's also an element of disability joy that comes from, like, there's a blessing that comes with suffering. That doesn't mean that it's okay to injure people, right? We don't want to force anyone to have disabilities, but nothing can explain how happy I was the day that me and 6 of my disabled friends were all stomping down Broadway with our mobility devices, right? Like, I'm in my wheelchair. I've got one with a walker, one with a cane, 2 that are blind and are using white canes. And we are all stomping down Broadway, claiming space, not being ashamed, not caring if anyone else around us is judging us, right? And in that moment, we are just there experiencing disability joy, right? And so it's one of those things that I hope everyone with disabilities can experience that joy. And I hope that non-disabled people cannot be threatened by that, right? There are some non-disabled people that get jealous, like, oh, you get to park up front, must be nice. And they don't really understand. They might see us experiencing joy and having a great time at a venue, but they don't necessarily know all of the myriad of things that we've had to do to be able to get to that venue. They don't understand the cost that we've had to endure. We've had to pay for extra devices. We've had to pay for support services. Like, I can't take an Uber. I have to take an Uber XL and pay more so that my device will fit in the trunk. There's all these things that non-disabled people don't recognize, and they may not be able to experience that disability joy, but I hope that they can sit back and watch other people with disabilities experiencing that joy, and that they can feel happy about that.
I do have one last question, and it's really focused on non-disabled people and how we can show up. What can we do to help improve accessibility in our city?
Oh, goodness. I think that we need votes, right? We need people that are going to vote and hold our city leaders accountable to people with disabilities. And so often, like, for example, we have a mayor's advisory committee, and that committee was in place for a couple of years, and then it kind of went defunct. Now it's back, but we're still kind of struggling as a committee we don't necessarily have like a budget allocation, like we may or may not be listened to when we make recommendations, but we really need the people of Nashville, right? The people that own businesses, the people that are non-disabled, to speak up and just let your elected representatives know that I care about people with disabilities and I want them in my community. I want you to do that ADA audit, right? Like the city council did tell the city, conduct a full ADA audit. The next step would be the city council to mandate it, right? And so right now the city is in a place where they can choose, am I going to listen to the council and do this ADA audit and seek to improve services? Or are we going to minimize this, right? In which case, I'm going back to the city council and I'm going to see if I can get them to change that resolution to a forced mandate. And a lot of times, disability accommodations do not require money. A lot of times it just requires a shift in your attitude and a shift in your planning and attention to people with vulnerable needs, and not hitting them in the face with judgment when they ask you for something, like not making it so intimidating for someone with disabilities to ask for help. I think that's the best thing. That, and just have fun with this, right? When you see people with disabilities out, like they're not always visible, but if you see people with disabilities that are sitting all alone, we may be all alone because we were forced into an ADA section and our friends are somewhere else standing up, right? Mm-hmm. And so be nice to people with disabilities when you see them out.
And I would also just suggest, Nashville is so incestuous. We know everybody. If you have a friend who owns a venue and hasn't, it's not ADA compliable, like have conversations with your friends, the people that own these venues, like get the conversation started, because we want you, Dr. Sin, out in the world being a punk rocker like you are.
Yay!
Because you're just such a joy. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you out there rocking it.
Yes, you are so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. And don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Nashville neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell your friends, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our CityCast Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Toodles.